London AIM-listed Pires Investments is a tech investment company which provides shareholders with exposure to a wide range of what the company calls next-generation technology businesses, with what it says is going to provide significant growth potential. Let's pick all this apart now with Nicholas Lee, who's a director of Pires Investments. Nick, good to talk to you. Thanks indeed for your time. This comes at a time when the tech sector is really in focus at the moment, a little bit on the downside. We know what's happened recently, but I want to get your thoughts on what we're talking about here in terms of what the company is interested in, the sort of tech investments you're looking at.
Yes, okay. So the main focus is really more on the sort of software technology side. And we find that very interesting because you can get some very rapid growth and it's easy to scale up these sorts of businesses. So within Pires at the moment, and I might just give you a quick sort of little bit of history. Originally, Pires was an investment company focused on natural resources. We did quite well in a couple of investments there, made some money, and then we decided to move into technology really in 2019. And the way we did that was to actually start off and invest in an actual already established fund, which gave us almost a sort of oven-ready portfolio of investments. And that fund is called Shareholder Value Ventures. And that's very much focused on the software technology side of things. So that's in a way our sort of core investment. And then surrounding that, we've got some other direct investments. Some of them are connected with Shareholder Value Ventures. So one company, which is called Get Visibility, is in the data sort of classification space. So we've got exposure via the fund, but also our own direct investment. And then more recently, we made an investment in what I would describe as a sort of digital assets sector. So cryptocurrency technology, and that's a company called Pluto Digital Assets. So those are they're the sort of the three groups within Pires.
Okay, well, let me just quickly catch up on something you mentioned there, because if you got an interest into the business a while back and you bought into what was effectively a resources company, you then turn it into a tech company. What is your background? What sort of confidence can an investor have in what you've done prior to make sure that we know that we're investing in the right people here?
Yeah, so my background is very much really in the investment banking space, and that's where I spent a lot of my career. And then more recently, I've got involved in running and managing small listed companies. In terms of the technology space, I've done quite a lot of that now over the last 2 or 3 years. But I think, one of the reasons we felt initially that we wanted to get into the technology space via a position in Shareholder Value Ventures is that that small venture capital fund is populated by real experts in the technology space. And so therefore we can really call on their expertise to add into our own expertise. And within the board at Pires, you've got really 2 other directors, John May, who got a lot of experience in the AIM space, and then a more recent addition, David Palumbo, who has much more of a tech background and runs quite a large company called EQTech. So, combination of both our own experience and our ability to call on expertise gives us a very deep understanding and capability within tech investment.
Run through the investment portfolio and what it's covering in terms of the sorts of tech companies we're talking about, or the areas of tech companies.
Yeah, so we've got, let's call it security. So something like a Get Visibility, which is also data classification, but there's an added element of security on top. And another company called Smart Tech, which is a cybersecurity threat management monitoring type business. So that's sort of one area. We've got a company called Naylor, which is really security on medical devices. Then we move more into the VR space. So there's one company, Engage XR, which is actually listed on AIM. And that was sort of one of the examples of a realization out of the fund, although we still have a significant stake. There's another company called Admix, which works on placing adverts within computer games. So it spreads really across, artificial intelligence, security, IoT, AR, and VR.
Yeah, and
It's quite broad.
what is common amongst these companies and the strategy? You're talking about early stage investments. I know behind you you've got a list of companies that you're involved
Yeah,
with. Now these seem to me to be names that I've either never heard of or beginning to
no,
hear of. Are we
yeah.
talking tiny companies that have little or no track record? What's
No,
your interest? How
okay,
do you get interest in these? Where do you find
right.
them?
So where if we start and we start, with our sort of core investment of Shore Value Ventures,
Hmm.
they have quite clear criteria as to when they invest in a company. So invariably, there has to be a team, there has to be a product, there has to be a problem that the product is trying to solve, and there has to be some sort of market validation, third party validation that actually it's a good product, which normally means some sort of revenue. So you're talking about companies, they're not early stage, so
Hmm.
they've got some revenue as a general rule, but they obviously then need to build out and commercialize that. And invariably what you find is that the tech has probably already been created, and then you've got to find a way of commercializing and taking that tech to market. So when you're then these companies are looking to raise funds, a lot of that money is really spent on bringing the tech to the marketplace. So sales, marketing, distribution, that sort of thing.
So,
That's the sort of, I would say, the general sort of theme.
So are you interested mostly in companies that are pre-IPO? I mean, do you have? I mean, this is a nice idea, I guess, in as much as if I was a prospective investor, I'd want to come to you to take a look at companies that I might not otherwise be able to get in touch with through this sort of platform. Is that something you major in, or do you buy into companies that are already listed?
Right. So the sort of, I guess, where we try to be a little bit different to say some other investment companies is that we are keen to find companies that are not a million miles away from exit or IPO, but haven't quite got to that point, because that's where you get the great the value accretion. If you pick them, you need to pick them at a point where they're sort of established but not too expensive, and then you help them move to that next phase. So that's broadly what we do. But there are, I mean, one example would be something like a smart tech. So the SVV have invested in smart tech. Well, that's effectively an established cybersecurity business that is in the process of going to IPO. And so some of those are quite attractive because you get a relatively quick realization, whereas some investment companies, it tends to be a one-way street. They raise money, take money in, and then nothing comes back from the investment for a while. So even just within the Shore Value Ventures Fund, there've already been one complete realization, which was a company called Artomatics, and then, as I mentioned a bit earlier, a company called Engage XR that has now listed, and we effectively sold some shares a little while ago to take out our cost, but have let the rest of it sort of run. So it's a sort of balance really of not too far away from an exit event, but somewhere where we can get interesting value accretion.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about shareholder returns. Again, going back to this scenario where I'm a prospective investor, I look at the company, I see you've got a market capitalization of just shy of 11 million pounds. But my understanding is that the last time you reported numbers, I think the half year, wasn't it, that you had a net asset value of about seven to eight or something. So you're already trading at a premium, aren't you? Explain more about that balance and how you can sell this idea to prospective investors.
So what we report on a sort of, certainly on a 6-month basis, what our net asset value is. Now, the issue with a portfolio of relatively fast growing companies is that net asset value is always lagging the real value of the company. And coupled with that, we are pretty conservative as to how we value our investments. And what I mean by that is, we will either value them at cost or carry them at cost, or we will revalue, but only where a third-party investor has come in and effectively establish that value, i.e. it's not an internal valuation. So it's only when a third party investor is putting more money into the particular company and they do it at a higher level than when we invested, we will write up the value of the company. And so invariably, at one point in time, you're carrying the company at a value, but we know that in the next few months after that, certain companies are looking for more money and have got that money, but you can't report that until that investment happens. And then what we do, we try and communicate to our shareholders and tell them, yes, this company has now raised X, and they've done that at a value that is, Y% higher than when we originally invested. And, just to give you an example, something like 7 companies in the portfolio just in 2021 have all been done funding rounds and been revalued upwards. So you're always going to lag whatever the figure was at the interims. It's going to be different today, which is why you would always expect to trade at a premium to that net asset value. And then it's, in a way, it's the market's view as to what that level of premium should be.
Where do you get your ideas for investments from? Are some of these from academia, or are they already companies that have gone out and are searching for money, and you invest in companies that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination. We've got a pretty good network of people that we talk to. So again, piggybacking on the Shore Valley Venture guys, they're networking all the time. So ideas come through from them. People phone us up. We get introduced to companies. Once you're in the space, you get to see quite a lot of interesting investments out there.
Let me talk a little bit more about what's happening in terms of the pipeline, where you're going, what you're investing in. I guess you can't talk too much detail about what you've got lined up, but I mean, we've got 2022 ahead of us. As I said, the tech sector has had a little bit of a wobble recently because of fears about higher interest rates. Do you adjust your sights on where you're going as a company based on the general investment environment, or is this a completely different dynamic that we're talking about? In other words, if, again, going back to this idea about buying shares in Pires Investments, are you a company which is, I guess, probably I'm asking for an answer as to whether or not your share price responds to the overall share price of the tech sector, or are you insulated from some of the moves that we're seeing in techs at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think we do get affected to a degree. That I think that's inevitable, but we do have quite a broad range of investments, and so that should sort of flatten out some of the volatility, I would say. In terms of what we're looking at going forward, well, it's really more of the same. I mean, we will move into certain new areas. So, for example, last year, the whole sort of cryptocurrency, digital asset space has been very interesting for people. So, we worked out a way as to how to play that, to see and to learn about that sector. And actually, to date, we've done very well on that with our investment in this company called Pluto Digital Assets. So we will move. We will look at, if we see an interesting trend, we might say, well, let's have a little look at, how we might do something sensible in that area, but still being clear about, the basis of how we would decide to make that investment.
I notice actually through this you are investing in NFTs, is that right? Non-fungible tokens. I know a lot of people talk a lot about the cryptocurrency market, but not so much about NFTs. How are you exposed to this market, and what are the likely returns in this area? Is it something you think is untapped at the moment in terms of investment and the potential?
Yeah, I mean, we started off in the digital asset space by looking at and it's more sort of technology rather than absolute holdings of coins and tokens, right, is sort of where we've moved to. And so we originally looked at almost a technology which would enable you to move around what's known as the DeFi space, which is it's almost how you might deploy your cryptocurrencies. So when we first got into it, we likened it to there's a US app called the Robinhood app, where you can make your investments via your app, and you can do it very easily and do it on your phone. So we looked at that, and we got some interesting tokens as part of that deal. And then that did very well. And we thought, well, you know what, let's just try and sort of de-risk it a bit. So that's when we used what we learned from that particular investment to get into this company called Pluto, which is a much more broader digital assets play. So they do NFTs. They've just interestingly moved into the gaming sector, which is an enormous sector. And they're looking at the application of tokens in that particular sector. So, it's an interesting area to, a lot of people might say, oh, well, it's all a bit artificial, we don't understand it. Well, until you've actually looked at it sensibly, it's difficult to form that view.
So very quickly, 2022, what's it likely to bring? You're going to bring companies to the market. We're going to see a higher profile of Pires Investments in the market and being more active in terms of investments and sell-offs.
I mean, I think as we sort of talked in the past, there are the Shore Valley Ventures Fund that we have. That's got to the point where it's done a lot of the deployment of its capital. It's now got to the point where it's ready to harvest those investments. So we're confident that there should be some realizations coming through that particular fund. And then Pluto Digital Assets, that's now just recently announced a tie-up with another listed company, and they're going to look to list in back in the UK, but also in Canada, which is a market where people probably ascribe a higher value to these sorts of companies than they do here. So that's going ahead. We've got another business called Low Six that's making progress towards an IPO. So we are certainly looking forward to some exits and IPOs in the course of 2022.
Yeah. Just one final question. I won't show a share price, but I think you're about a third the value than were this time last year. How do you reward shareholders, and where do things go from here? Because clearly you want to be seen to be getting cash back to shareholders. Those shareholders that are invested, they need some sort of payment back.
Yeah. So we're at the moment we're very focused on trying to get the share price to reflect what the underlying business is, and as we affect realizations and IPOs and stuff like that, then that will certainly help that. At our last AGM, we also got approval to go through a capital restructuring process, standard thing, to enable us, if appropriate at the right time, to be able to be in a position to pay dividends to shareholders. So there are a number of ways that we're looking at where we can reward our shareholders.
Look, Nick, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much indeed for joining us and explaining what you're doing at Pires Investments. Interesting story. And of course, when you're talking about these small companies, it's a way obviously for investors to be exposed in a way they wouldn't otherwise be able to get exposure to what is essentially a growth market. But Nick, thanks for your time. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you very much.
Nicholas Lee is a director of Pires Investments PLC. For more videos from us here at IGTV, join us on Twitter at IGCom, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.